Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the holographic display show dozens of human warships preparing for departure. Earth's orbital shipyards buzzed with activity, as the largest military fleet in human history prepared to answer a distress call from the edge of known space. The message had arrived 3 days ago through quantum relay stations. It came from the peaceful Zilani Republic, a collection of herbivorous species who had welcomed humanity into the galactic community 2 years earlier. The Zilani had been among the first to treat humans as equals, rather than the dangerous primitives that most alien civilizations saw them as. Admiral Marcus Webb briefed the fleet commanders through secure channels. The Zilani colonies in the Theta sector were under attack by something called the Void Swarm. These creatures consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing behind but empty space. The Zilani military, designed for exploration and peaceful trade, had no weapons capable of stopping such a threat. Sarah remembered her first meeting with Ambassador Kethler, a tall, graceful being with silver fur and large, gentle eyes. The Zilani diplomat had been fascinated by human culture, especially their art and music. Unlike other species who feared human aggression, the Zilani saw beauty in human passion and emotion. The human fleet consisted of 200 warships, from massive dreadnoughts to fast attack cruisers. Each vessel carried weapons that would terrify most galactic civilizations. Humans had learned to fight in the gravity wells of gas giants, the radiation storms of dying stars, and the crushing depths of ocean worlds. They called Earth a death world for good reason. As the fleet prepared to enter hyperspace, Sarah thought about the other species in the galaxy. The consortium of peaceful worlds had already declared the Zilani colonies lost. They believed nothing could stop the Void Swarm once it began feeding. Their solution was to evacuate survivors and abandon entire star systems. The Korthak Empire, militaristic and proud, had offered to absorb Zilani refugees as worker slaves. The merchant guilds calculated profit margins on selling Zilani technology before the colonies fell. Everyone had given up except the humans. Sarah's communication officer received final clearance from Earth Command. The Admiral's voice echoed across all ships. Today we show the galaxy what it means to answer a friend's call for help. The Zilani trusted us when others called us monsters. Now we prove that monsters can be exactly what you need when darkness comes calling. The fleet entered hyperspace in perfect formation. Hundreds of human warships, carrying thousands of Marines and enough firepower to crack moons, raced toward the distant Zilani colonies. Behind them, alien observers noted that the humans had mobilized faster than any military force in recorded galactic history. In the depths of space, something ancient and hungry sensed their approach. The Void Swarm had consumed 1,000 civilizations across the ages. Each time, the galaxy's defenders had fallen quickly, their weapons useless against beings that existed partially outside normal reality. The swarm's collective consciousness felt amusement at these approaching creatures from a young, violent world. Sarah checked her weapons systems one final time. The Defiance carried enough nuclear missiles to sterilize a continent, plasma cannons that could melt through battleship armor, and a crew trained in close-quarters combat that would make Korthak warriors weep. She smiled grimly as she thought about the swarm's upcoming surprise. The human fleet would arrive at Zilani space in 18 hours. By then, 3 more colonies would likely fall to the swarm's endless hunger. But the creatures had never faced an enemy that considered their homeworld's environment a daily training exercise in survival. Admiral Webb's final message to the fleet was simple. Zilani space in 18 hours. The swarm wants to feed on our friends. Let's teach them why even other predators fear the apex species from Sol 3. The ships raced through hyperspace, carrying humanity's answer to an ancient evil. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had earned their reputation as the most dangerous species to ever leave their homeworld. The Void Swarm had consumed peaceful civilizations for millions of years, but they had never encountered the children of a death world before. In the forward observation deck, Marine Sergeant Jake Rodriguez cleaned his assault rifle while watching the hyperspace tunnel. Around him, 2,000 other Marines performed similar rituals. They had trained for boarding actions against hostile ships, ground combat on airless moons, and urban warfare in alien cities. Today, they would face something that had never been killed before. The Defiance's AI calculated optimal weapon deployments against energy-based life forms. Human technology, born from centuries of warfare against their own species, proved remarkably adaptable to threats that had stumped galactic science for eons. Where others saw impossible odds, humans saw an interesting tactical challenge. Sarah looked at the countdown timer showing their estimated arrival. Somewhere ahead, Zilani families huddled in underground shelters while their world burned above them. The galaxy had abandoned them to their fate, but the humans were coming. The Deathworlder fleet was moving out, and the universe would never be the same. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Zilani territory to find a scene of devastation. 3 star systems showed signs of complete planetary consumption. Where lush garden worlds had once orbited their suns, only debris fields remained. The void swarm had left nothing behind but cosmic dust and broken dreams. Commander Elena Vasquez piloted her reconnaissance frigate through the wreckage of what had been Zilani Prime's sister colony. Her ship's sensors detected no life signs, no structures, nothing that indicated a civilization had ever existed here. The thoroughness of the destruction impressed even her battle-hardened crew. Admiral Webb studied the tactical reports from across the fleet. The swarm operated unlike any enemy humanity had ever encountered. Rather than conquering territory, they simply erased it. Intelligence suggested the creatures existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions human science couldn't yet understand. On the bridge of the UES Retribution, Captain David Kim reviewed footage captured by deep space monitoring stations before they fell. The void swarm appeared as massive, writhing shadows that moved between stars like living darkness. When they reached a planet, reality itself seemed to bend around them until matter simply stopped existing. The Zilani refugee ships fleeing from the inner colonies painted a picture of absolute terror. Captain Sarah Chen watched the communications from her command center as Ambassador Kethlar's own vessel broadcasted a desperate plea for evacuation assistance. His normally melodious voice cracked with grief as he described watching his homeworld dissolve into nothingness. Human scientists worked frantically to analyze what little data they possessed about the swarm. Dr. Amanda Foster, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, compared the creatures to cosmic viruses that infected reality itself. Her preliminary findings suggested they fed on the quantum foundations that held matter together. The first contact came as the human fleet approached the 4th Zilani system. Massive shapes emerged from the space between dimensions, their forms shifting and changing as they moved. The creatures resembled enormous jellyfish made of living void, their tentacles stretching across light years of space. Sarah felt her ship's artificial gravity fluctuate as the nearest swarm entity approached. Her engineering team reported impossible readings from their reality anchors, devices that kept human ships stable in hyperspace. The creature's presence warped space-time around it like a black hole, but without the predictable physics. The swarm's first attack came not as weapons fire, but as an attempt to simply erase the lead human ships from existence. Reality rippled around the UES Vanguard as cosmic forces tried to unmake the vessel at a fundamental level. The ship's hull began to fade like a photograph left in sunlight. Captain Rodriguez of the Vanguard activated humanity's secret weapon against impossible threats: pure, stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Emergency systems flooded the ship with quantum stabilizers, while the crew manually reinforced their vessel's grip on reality. They literally refused to stop existing through sheer force of will. The swarm's collective consciousness reeled in surprise. In millions of years of feeding, no prey species had ever resisted the dissolution process. The creatures that called themselves humans were somehow anchoring themselves to reality through methods the ancient predators couldn't comprehend. Admiral Webb seized the moment of confusion to order the fleet into attack formation. Human weapons, designed to work in the chaotic environments around black holes and neutron stars, proved surprisingly effective against beings that existed partially outside normal space. The UES Defiance fired its main plasma cannon into the nearest swarm entity. The superheated matter, compressed to stellar core densities, tore through the creature's form like a blade through mist. For the first time in cosmic ages, a void swarm entity screamed in pain across multiple dimensions. Marine boarding pods launched from human carriers toward smaller swarm creatures. The pods, designed to penetrate alien hull plating, punched through dimensional barriers that had protected the entities for eons. Inside each pod, Marines in power armor prepared to board enemies that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. Sergeant Jake Rodriguez led the first boarding action in galactic history against a creature made of living void. His squad's weapons had been modified to fire rounds that existed in several dimensions at once. When they opened fire inside the swarm entity, reality itself became a battlefield. The creature tried to phase out of normal space, but human technology followed it into the gaps between dimensions. Marines trained for zero-gravity combat found themselves fighting in spaces where up and down were suggestions rather than rules. They adapted with the flexibility that had made their species successful on a world that actively tried to kill them. Dr. Foster monitored the battle from the fleet's mobile laboratory ship. Her instruments detected something unprecedented. The swarm entities were actually dying, not just retreating or reforming, but experiencing true death as human weapons disrupted their exotic matter matrices. The tactical situation shifted as more swarm entities emerged from the cosmic void to investigate the disturbance. Hundreds of reality-eating predators surrounded the human fleet, their alien forms blotting out the stars. They had come to feed on the stubborn creatures from the violent little world called Earth. Admiral Webb opened fleet communications to address his forces. His words carried across 200 warships filled with humans who had trained their entire lives for impossible battles. They eat reality itself, but they've never tried to digest a species that makes the impossible happen before breakfast. All ships engage at will. Let's show them what evolution in hell looks like. The space around the fourth Zelani system erupted into the strangest battle in galactic history as humanity went to war with the fundamental forces of entropy itself. The battle raged across multiple dimensions as human ships engaged the void swarm in combat, unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Captain Sarah Chen watched her tactical display show weapon impacts that registered in spectrums that shouldn't exist while her crew fought enemies that phased in and out of reality like cosmic ghosts. Marine Sergeant Jake Rodriguez found himself leading a boarding party through the interior of a creature that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. His squad's modified armor allowed them to maintain coherence while the entity's body shifted around them like liquid nightmare. They planted quantum charges in what Dr. Foster's scientists had identified as the creature's consciousness centers. The explosions echoed across realities as the massive swarm entity convulsed and began to collapse. For the first time in millions of years, one of the ancient predators died completely, its form dissolving into harmless energy that scattered across the local star system. Admiral Webb coordinated the fleet's movements from the command ship UES Indomitable. His tactical officers had given up trying to understand how their weapons were damaging enemies that shouldn't exist. Instead, they focused on what worked. Overwhelming firepower applied with the strategic brilliance humanity had developed through millennia of warfare. The swarm's response escalated as more entities emerged from the space between stars. These newcomers were larger and older than the first wave, their forms rippling with cosmic energies that had consumed entire galactic civilizations. They moved, with the confident hunger of apex predators who had never encountered serious resistance. Captain Elena Vasquez led a squadron of fast attack cruisers in hit-and-run strikes against the largest swarm entities. Her ships used their superior maneuverability to stay ahead of the creature's reality-warping attacks, while plasma torpedoes found gaps in their dimensional armor. The turning point came when Dr. Foster made a crucial discovery about the swarm's nature. The creatures weren't just feeding on matter and energy, they were consuming the quantum information that defined reality itself. But human technology, developed through trial and error in Earth's hostile environment, operated on principles that the ancient entities had never encountered. Human ships used quantum entanglement communicators that maintained instant contact across impossible distances. These devices created information patterns too complex for the swarm to digest, forming protective barriers around each vessel. The fleet was essentially poisoning the creatures that tried to feed on their technology. The UES Retribution demonstrated this principle by ramming one of the smaller swarm entities at full speed. Instead of being dissolved like previous victims, the human ship's quantum field generators overloaded the creature's absorption process. The entity literally choked on the ship's exotic matter signatures and expelled the vessel intact. Captain David Kim used this discovery to develop new tactics. His engineering teams modified their ship's reactor cores to produce quantum static that disrupted the swarm's feeding process. Human vessels began operating as mobile sources of informational chaos that the ancient predators couldn't metabolize. The Zilani refugees, watching from their fleeing ships, witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. The unstoppable force that had consumed their worlds was not only being resisted, but actively driven back. Human warships carved through the swarm formations like antibodies attacking a cosmic infection. Sergeant Rodriguez led his Marines in a second boarding action, this time targeting what appeared to be a swarm command entity. The creature's interior resembled a living library where stolen memories from 1,000 consumed civilizations floated like ghostly data streams. His squad fought their way through the preserved death agonies of entire species. The Marine teams discovered that the swarm entities maintained their coherence through shared consciousness, distributed across dimensional barriers. By disrupting these connections with quantum interference weapons, they could effectively lobotomize the creatures. The ancient predators began to fragment into smaller, confused entities that human ships could destroy individually. Dr. Foster's research teams identified the swarm's greatest weakness. They had evolved to consume static civilizations that developed along predictable technological paths. Humanity's chaotic development, shaped by constant warfare and environmental pressure, had produced innovations the creatures couldn't process or predict. The battle's climax arrived when the largest swarm entity, ancient beyond measure and vast as a moon, attempted to devour the entire human fleet simultaneously. Its form expanded across light years as it tried to encompass all 200 human ships within its reality-negating embrace. Admiral Webb's response demonstrated why humans had become the galaxy's most feared military force. Instead of retreating, he ordered every ship to overload their quantum field generators simultaneously, while flying directly into the creature's core. The combined informational chaos of 200 human vessels created a feedback loop that the ancient predator couldn't survive. The massive entity convulsed across multiple dimensions before literally exploding into constituent particles. Its death scream echoed through hyperspace as fragments of its consciousness scattered across the galaxy, warning other swarm entities about the dangerous new predators from the small blue world. The remaining swarm creatures began a hasty retreat, phasing out of normal space to escape the human fleet's relentless pursuit. For the first time in cosmic history, the reality eaters had encountered prey that fought back successfully and forced them to flee. Captain Sarah Chen surveyed the battlefield from her bridge as emergency teams began rescue operations for surviving Zilani civilians. The space around the fourth system was littered with the quantum remains of defeated swarm entities, their exotic matter slowly dissipating into harmless radiation. The fleet's victory was complete, but Admiral Webb knew this was only the beginning. Intelligence suggested more swarm clusters existed throughout the galaxy, and other species needed to learn how to defend themselves against this ancient threat. Humanity had just become the galaxy's unofficial exterminators for cosmic horrors. 3 days after the battle, the human fleet worked alongside Zilani survivors to establish emergency colonies on the few planets that had escaped the swarm's hunger. Captain Sarah Chen coordinated relief efforts while her engineering teams helped rebuild basic infrastructure with remarkable efficiency. Ambassador Kethler stood on the observation deck of the UES Defiance, watching human Marines distribute food supplies to Zilani refugees. His silver fur had gained gray streaks during the evacuation, but his large eyes held something they hadn't shown in weeks: hope. The humans had achieved what every military analyst in the galaxy had declared impossible. Admiral Webb found himself in an unprecedented position as requests for assistance flooded in from across known space. The Consortium of Peaceful Worlds, the same organization that had written off the Zilani colonies as lost, now desperately wanted human protection against future swarm incursions. Dr. Foster's research teams made disturbing discoveries while examining captured swarm remains. The creature's biological matrices contained genetic information from thousands of extinct species, suggesting they had been feeding across the galaxy for millions of years. Earth's databases showed no record of most civilizations represented in the samples. The political implications hit the galactic community like a shockwave. Species that had dismissed humans as violent primitives suddenly found themselves dependent on those same primitives for protection against an existential threat. The power balance in known space shifted overnight. Captain Elena Vasquez led a reconnaissance mission to map the extent of swarm activity throughout the local galactic arm. Her findings painted a terrifying picture. Entire sectors showed signs of systematic consumption dating back millennia. Hundreds of civilizations had simply vanished without leaving any trace. The Korthek Empire, traditionally the galaxy's dominant military force, requested a formal alliance with humanity after their own encounters with swarm scout entities. Their proud warrior culture had been humbled by creatures that their weapons couldn't even touch, let alone destroy. Sergeant Jake Rodriguez found himself training alien soldiers in anti-swarm combat techniques. The irony wasn't lost on him that species who had once called humans barbaric now begged to learn their barbaric methods. His students included everything from crystalline beings to energy-based life forms. The merchant guilds approached Admiral Webb with offers to purchase human quantum field technology, willing to pay prices that would fund Earth's military expansion for centuries. The Admiral declined, knowing that some advantages were too important to share with potential competitors. Captain David Kim led a task force to establish forward bases in previously consumed star systems. His engineers discovered that swarm feeding left behind quantum scars in spacetime that could be detected and tracked. Humanity began mapping the creature's historical feeding patterns across the galaxy. The Zelani Republic officially petitioned Earth for permanent protection, offering their most advanced agricultural and terraforming technologies in exchange. Other species watched these negotiations carefully, calculating whether similar deals might be necessary for their own survival. Dr. Foster's analysis of swarm feeding behavior revealed a disturbing pattern. The creatures appeared to be following some form of galactic harvesting schedule, systematically consuming civilizations that reached specific technological thresholds. Humanity had apparently interrupted a cosmic farming operation. Intelligence reports indicated that the defeated swarm cluster was communicating with larger groupings elsewhere in the galaxy. The creatures were learning about human capabilities and presumably developing countermeasures. The war was far from over. The human fleet began implementing new defensive strategies based on their recent victories. Ships received upgraded quantum field generators, while Marines trained for extended dimensional combat operations. Earth's industrial capacity shifted to support what military analysts predicted would be a galaxy-wide conflict. Ambassador Keithlar worked with human diplomats to establish the Galactic Defense Pact, a mutual protection agreement between species threatened by swarm activity. The treaty marked humanity's formal emergence as a major galactic power despite their relative technological youth. Captain Sarah Chen received orders to lead an expanded battle group toward the galactic core, where long-range sensors had detected massive swarm concentrations. The creatures appeared to be massing for a coordinated response to humanity's unexpected resistance. The psychological impact on other species proved as significant as the military victory. Civilizations that had accepted cosmic predation as an unavoidable fact of existence suddenly saw alternatives. Revolution and hope spread through previously fatalistic cultures. Admiral Webb established the Human Defense Corps, a joint military organization combining Earth forces with allied species who demonstrated the courage to fight rather than simply evacuate when swarms appeared. The Corps attracted volunteers from across the galaxy, despite its dangerous mission. Zelani scientists working alongside human researchers made breakthrough discoveries about dimensional physics. Their peaceful nature and human ingenuity proved complementary, producing technologies that neither species could have developed alone. The partnership became a model for future alliances. The captured swarm consciousness fragments revealed through interrogation that humanity represented a completely unexpected variable in the creature's million-year feeding cycle. They had evolved to consume civilizations that developed along predictable paths, but Earth's chaotic evolution had produced innovations outside their experience. Economic disruption spread throughout galactic civilization as species realized their traditional assumptions about cosmic order were wrong. If the unstoppable swarm could be stopped, what other fundamental beliefs needed re-examination? Markets collapsed and reformed around new realities. Captain Rodriguez led elite Marine units in training exercises designed to prepare for boarding actions against larger swarm entities. His troops practiced fighting in environments where geometry was a suggestion and cause-effect relationships operated according to alien physics. The human fleet prepared to depart Zilani space, leaving behind defense platforms and trained local forces. Their mission had evolved from rescue operation to galactic pest control, with new challenges waiting in the cosmic deep. 6 months later, the expanded human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the galactic core to find a site that challenged their understanding of the universe. Massive swarm entities, each the size of gas giants, moved in perfect formation around a central construct that defied description. The structure appeared to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, while harvesting energy directly from the galactic center's black hole. Captain Sarah Chen commanded a battle group that now included ships from 12 different species. The Zilani had contributed advanced agricultural vessels converted to medical ships, while the reformed Korthak Empire provided heavy assault cruisers. Humanity's diplomatic success had created the largest allied fleet in galactic history. Admiral Webb studied intelligence reports that painted a disturbing picture of swarm capabilities. The entities at the galactic core were older and more sophisticated than anything they had encountered before. These creatures had been feeding when the galaxy was young, accumulating power and knowledge across cosmic ages. Dr. Foster's research teams worked frantically to understand the central construct's purpose. Preliminary analysis suggested it was some form of reality engine that allowed the swarm to modify the fundamental laws of physics within localized areas. The implications terrified even the most optimistic scientists. The first probe missions revealed the true scope of the challenge ahead. The core swarm entities didn't just consume matter and energy. They harvested the quantum information that defined reality itself, storing it in crystalline matrices that existed outside normal spacetime. They were building something that could threaten the universe itself. Captain Elena Vasquez led reconnaissance flights through the outer perimeter of the swarm formation. Her ships, equipped with experimental dimensional sensors, detected hundreds of thousands of smaller entities organized into hunting packs that patrolled vast territories around the core. Cluster Sergeant Jake Rodriguez trained mixed-species Marine units for what military analysts predicted would be the most complex boarding operations ever attempted. His troops included Zilani technical specialists, Korthak heavy assault warriors, and humans who specialized in impossible combat scenarios. The swarm's response to the Allied fleet's approach demonstrated their evolved intelligence. Instead of attacking directly, they began manipulating local spacetime to create maze-like distortions that separated individual ships from the main formation. Traditional fleet tactics became useless in an environment where distance and direction changed without warning. Captain David Kim's engineering teams worked around the clock to develop navigation systems capable of functioning in variable geometry spacetime. Their solution involved quantum entanglement beacons that maintained fixed reference points regardless of local reality. Distortions. Intelligence gathered from captured swarm fragments revealed the entity's ultimate goal. They were constructing a reality anchor that would allow them to rewrite the fundamental constants of physics throughout the galaxy. With such power, they could eliminate the quantum chaos that made human technology effective against them. The Allied fleet's first major engagement occurred when swarm patrol groups attempted to isolate and consume individual ships. Human vessels used their quantum field generators to create stable pockets of normal physics, while Allied ships provided covering fire with weapons modified using human technology. Dr. Foster made a breakthrough discovery about the relationship between the swarm entities and their central construct. The massive structure wasn't just a tool. It was the collective consciousness of every creature the swarm had ever consumed. Destroying it would require fighting the accumulated knowledge of 1 million extinct civilizations, the battle plan that emerged from war councils between human and Allied commanders represented a new form of warfare. Instead of traditional ship-to-ship combat, they would need to conduct simultaneous operations across multiple dimensions while fighting enemies that could alter reality around them. Captain Sarah Chen led the first assault wave against the swarm's outer perimeter defenses. Her battle group used coordinated quantum interference to disrupt the entity's ability to phase between dimensions. forcing them into normal space where conventional weapons could be effective. The psychological warfare aspect of the campaign proved as important as the military actions. Broadcasts from the Allied fleet reached swarm-controlled systems throughout the galaxy, demonstrating to surviving populations that resistance was possible and help was coming. Admiral Webb coordinated the most complex military operation in galactic history while managing political pressures from species who wanted to negotiate with the swarm rather than fight them. His response was characteristically human. Some threats could only be answered with overwhelming force. Marine boarding actions against the larger swarm entities became exercises in applied impossibility. Sergeant Rodriguez's teams fought through spaces where time flowed backward and gravity pointed in directions that didn't exist, using pure human stubbornness to maintain operational effectiveness. The Zilani contribution to the war effort extended beyond ships and supplies. Their peaceful nature allowed them to detect patterns in swarm behavior that more militaristic species missed. They identified weaknesses in the entity's collective consciousness that could be exploited. With precise psychological attacks, allied scientists working with human researchers developed weapons that targeted the swarm's fundamental nature rather than their physical forms. These quantum disruptors could unravel the exotic matter matrices that held the ancient entities together across multiple dimensions. The swarm's countermeasures evolved rapidly as they adapted to human tactics. New entity types appeared that were specifically designed to counter quantum interference weapons, forcing the Allied fleet to constantly innovate their approaches to combat. Captain Kim's reconnaissance missions deep into swarm territory revealed the true scale of their galactic presence. Entire sectors had been converted into feeding grounds where reality itself had been modified to make consumption more efficient. The war wasn't just about defeating enemies. It was about restoring the universe to its natural state. As the Allied fleet prepared for the final assault on the galactic core construct, messages arrived from across known space. Species that had hidden from the swarm for millennia were emerging to join the fight. Humanity had inspired the galaxy to stand up against cosmic bullies who had dominated through fear for too long. The stage was set for a battle that would determine whether free will and chaos would survive in the universe, or if ancient order and predetermined consumption would reign supreme across the stars. The final battle began when the Allied fleet achieved something impossible. They surprised the swarm. Using quantum tunneling technology developed from captured entity fragments, Admiral Webb's forces bypassed the outer perimeter defenses and appeared directly within the core formation. The ancient predators, accustomed to methodical consumption, had never faced an enemy willing to risk everything on a desperate gamble. Captain Sarah Chen led the primary assault on the central construct, while reality warped around her ship like liquid madness. The UES Defiance, reinforced with quantum stabilizers and crewed by humans who had trained their entire lives for impossible situations, punched through dimensional barriers that should have been impenetrable. The construct revealed itself as something beyond alien architecture. It was a crystallized universe where the laws of physics had been rewritten by cosmic intelligences. Inside its impossible geometry, the accumulated consciousness of 1,000,000 consumed civilizations screamed for release from their eternal imprisonment. Sergeant Jake Rodriguez led the largest boarding operation in military history as 10,000 Marines from 30 different species launched simultaneous attacks on key swarm entities. His human troops adapted to combat in spaces where thoughts became weapons and memories could kill, while their alien allies provided covering fire with technologies that shouldn't have been compatible. Dr. Foster coordinated the scientific assault from her mobile laboratory ship, using captured swarm technology to map the construct's internal structure. Her teams discovered that the ancient entities had been building more than a reality anchor. They were creating a cosmic reset device that would return the universe to a state of perfect order and predictability. The swarm's response demonstrated intelligence evolved across cosmic ages. They began sacrificing smaller entities to power massive reality distortions that trapped individual ships in pocket universes where time moved differently. Some Allied vessels found themselves fighting battles that lasted years, while only minutes passed in normal space. Captain Elena Vasquez broke through these temporal barriers using techniques that would have been considered theoretical impossibilities months earlier. Her ship's quantum field generators created stable time streams that allowed trapped vessels to synchronize with the main assault force. The turning point came when human marines reached the construct's core and discovered the source of swarm power. The ancient entities maintained their existence by consuming the quantum information that defined individual consciousness. They were literally feeding on the universe's capacity for free will and unpredictability. Admiral Webb coordinated a galaxy-spanning operation as Allied reinforcements arrived from every corner of known space. Species that had been enemies for millennia put aside their differences to fight an opponent that threatened the very concept of independent existence. The construct's defenses included weaponized mathematics that could erase objects from history by proving they had never existed. Human ships countered with chaos generators that introduced random variables into the swarm's calculations, creating logical paradoxes that crashed their reality-altering systems. Captain David Kim led engineering teams in the most complex technical operation ever attempted. They reversed the construct's polarity while it was actively rewriting local physics, essentially hacking the universe's source code while it was running. The process required split-second timing, coordinated across multiple dimensions. The swarm's final gambit involved attempting to merge their collective consciousness with the galaxy's central black hole, creating a gravitational intelligence that would consume matter, energy, and information throughout known space. Only the combined firepower of the entire Allied fleet prevented this cosmic catastrophe. Dr. Foster's breakthrough came when she realized that the construct's power source was also its greatest weakness. The accumulated consciousness of consumed civilizations wasn't fully integrated. It was trapped in a state of eternal struggle against the swarm's control. By amplifying this resistance, they could turn the construct's own power against its creators. Sergeant Rodriguez fought his way through the construct's core with a mixed unit of humans and Zilani. Their different approaches to problem-solving creating tactical combinations the swarm couldn't predict. Where human aggression failed, Zilani creativity succeeded, and vice versa. The liberation process required the Allied fleet to essentially perform surgery on reality itself. Each rescued civilization's consciousness had to be carefully extracted from the construct without damaging the universe's fundamental structure. The operation took place simultaneously across 17 dimensions. As the construct began to collapse, the swarm entities throughout the galaxy felt their connection to their power source severing. Ancient predators that had dominated cosmic food chains for millions of years suddenly found themselves as vulnerable as their former prey. Captain Sarah Chen watched from the Defiance's bridge as the central construct imploded across multiple realities. The explosion released energy equivalent to stellar formation, while liberating the consciousness patterns of every civilization the swarm had ever consumed. Ghost signals from extinct species flooded communication channels as they experienced freedom after eons of imprisonment. The aftermath revealed the true scope of the swarm's impact on galactic history. Civilizations thought extinct began broadcasting from hidden refuges where survivors had waited for rescue. Technologies and art forms that had been lost for millennia started reappearing as freed consciousness. Patterns shared their knowledge. Admiral Webb found himself coordinating the reconstruction of galactic civilization, while managing first contact with hundreds of species that had been presumed dead. The political landscape changed overnight as ancient kingdoms reclaimed their territories and forgotten alliances were renewed. The human fleet's victory achieved more than military success. It restored the galaxy's faith in the possibility of fighting impossible odds and winning. Species that had accepted cosmic bullying as natural law began standing up to other ancient threats that had seemed unstoppable. 1 year later, Captain Sarah Chen stood on Earth's orbital platform watching construction of the new Galactic Defense Fleet. Ships from across known space were being built to human specifications, equipped with quantum chaos generators and crewed by mixed-species teams trained in Deathworlder combat techniques. The swarm threat hadn't been completely eliminated. Scattered entities still lurked in the void between galaxies, but they now faced a universe that had learned to fight back. Humanity had answered one distress call and ended up teaching the galaxy that no threat was too big to face when free beings stood together. Ambassador Kethlar spoke at the dedication ceremony for the memorial honoring all species that had fallen to the swarm. His words echoed across the galaxy. We learned that monsters exist in the dark between stars, but we also learned that sometimes the monsters are on our side. The humans taught us that courage is contagious, and that the universe belongs to those brave enough to defend it.